So, Madame Voodoo is a young adult fantasy all about magic and living in New York as an 18-year-old and just trying to get through life whilst there's all of these crazy magical things going on.
Amos Madra.
Hello and a warm welcome. I'm joined by author A.W. Jackson. A.W., a warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us today. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Great to have you here. So, you've written a book.
Yes.
Talk to us about this incredible book. I mean, just the title itself, I love it.
Thank you. So Madame Voodoo is a young adult fantasy all about magic and living in New York as an 18-year-old and just trying to get through life whilst there's all of these crazy magical things going on.
Yeah, and this particular title, why did you go for that, Madame Voodoo?
To be honest, I don't know. I had this idea originally back when I was in college, and that was 6, 7 years ago. And the story was nothing like it was now, but the title stuck with me as that was just what it needed to be called.
Yeah. And New York, why is New York as the location? What was special about that place?
I had visited New York for my 18th birthday, and I loved the city, and I feel like it's a very magical place in general. And I love when fantasy worlds take place within our world still, and it has that urban style to it. So I thought New York would be the perfect place to have this crazy magical world going on underneath it all.
Sounds a bit like Ghostbusters sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, talk to us about some of the influences, putting this mythical magic world with a real magical world that we all know, which is New York. And again, you spoke there perfectly about wanting to put the two together. But I want to know more about your influences. Of course, you went to New York when you were younger, but the magical side of things, perhaps. What were the influences there growing up?
So I've always loved watching and reading about fantasy, and I used to spend a lot of time with my mum watching a lot of witch shows. So things like Charmed and Sabrina the Teenage Witch, all growing up and watching all of those magical things just is like warps who I am now, and I've forever been obsessed with it. So to be able to create my own world with my own magical rules and do what I want with it, and yeah, that's where the inspirations come from, is because I've loved everyone else's opinions on it, but I can still do my own little twist.
Yeah, yeah. And without giving too much away, could you tell us a little bit about, say, parts in the book where it's touch and go just to grab the reader's attention and yeah, just draw us in.
Yeah, so one of the rules I had when I was making this book was that every chapter had to have some magic going on because it's a book about fantasy, and I don't like reading things that drag on. It's a very fast-paced book. I'm a very fast-paced person. So I'd never be able to write something where we're dragging out one kiss over pages and pages, because that's just not who I am. That's not something I'd enjoy reading or writing. So it is boom, boom, boom. There's constantly something going on. Every chapter ends with you're like waiting on the edge of your seat for the next chapter to start. Um, and it's an adventure. We go from New York to also New Orleans as well within the
I
book.
was gonna say,
To
why not? Where's New Orleans in all of
yeah,
this?
so we couldn't do a voodoo story without having, going back to the roots of where it all started in New Orleans, America. And the main character will get to go on a little self-discovery journey and find out more about her past, which has been pretty kept secret up until that point. Um, and then we will return to New York for the great finale and everything that's going on afterwards. But there's so many characters, and everyone has their own storyline and subplot. And yeah, that's the kind of story that I like to do. I'm too easily distracted to just have one main storyline going about the whole thing. I need the interactions and the sketchy underhandings of other characters going on at the same time.
Sounds absolutely brilliant. And I'm glad that New Orleans got a part in this.
Yeah.
So, this book has been in the making for quite some time, hasn't it? It's
Yeah.
just now you finished it. Talk to us about
So
that journey.
yeah, I came up with the original idea years ago, like I said, back in college, and I kept picking it up and putting it back down over the years. But it was only in 2022 when, through someone that I work with, she told me that she'd written a book and that she wanted to get it published. And I was like, this is a really weird coincidence. I've started writing a book before as well, and she got me back into it. So without her, none of this would probably have even happened. But so I spent 2022 getting back into it, rereading what I'd done, changing a lot because back when I was 17, I didn't know what I was doing. So it wasn't great. Um, and then it just kind of blossomed into what it was. And I sent it off in the hopes that someone might accept it. And then it's been really well received so far. Everyone's loved it. So I'm happy.
Congratulations. It's just incredible to hear. And,
Thank you.
writing is something that you've enjoyed doing from a young age, but something that you stepped away from for a period of time.
So when I was younger, I loved reading and I was really into it. And I loved coming up with stories and stuff. But during like high school, it's high school, things were not great. And kind of fell out of love with reading because it became more of a chore for school and all that. And so that kind of suffered my like reading and writing skills in that sense during that time. And then when I got older and got out of that situation, um, reading it still had that bad connotation, and that like a chunky book would be like too intimidating for me to read, which is one of the reasons I wanted to write my book. Was I wanted to write something that was accessible to a beginner, but someone who's a great reader would also still enjoy it. So someone like me could go into a bookshop and not be scared by picking it up. So that was a really important thing for me as well. And to have it as to feel like you're reading something that hasn't been overly written to death for some kind of English homework or English literature assignment. It's something that you can read and relax while you're reading it. You don't have to stress about what you're reading. Well, I don't anyway.
And when I hear that again, it's a great journey that you've taken to get to where you are today. How can we encourage younger people to read more?
That's a really good question. And I think it goes back to like for someone like me, there's this stigma of, oh, well, if you don't read books, well, you're not very smart, or if you don't read books, then, you know, if sometimes it can be like a very exclusive club to be an avid reader when it doesn't need to be. And I think more books like mine, in the sense where you don't have to, you could never have read a book before, and I think you'd be able to easily read it because it's written in such a way that you, it's not scary to read. It's easy, and you could read it in within a day, to be honest, because it's not a hugely long book. Um, but to be, to encourage younger kids to read is a task. I'll give you that. It's quite a hard one. Um, but I think encouraging kids in schools and not being so set on the curriculum books and introducing more things that people of that age would be interested in reading, because that was a main thing why I didn't enjoy it, is because I'm sorry, Mice of Men isn't personally for me, especially when I'm 12 years old.
Yeah.
So that was a struggle to get through that. And I think it can have long-lasting effects on kids to be forced to read books that they don't necessarily enjoy or understand or relate to. So I think maybe broadening the horizon on what can be done through the curriculum.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. And yeah, I was subjected to Mice and Men as well. But although I'll admit I did enjoy it, it was a good book. So now in terms of the writing, can we expect more books in the future?
Yes, so I've already signed with Cranport already on another book within the Madame Voodoo universe, which is not the direct sequel. It focuses on a character who isn't the nicest of characters, a bit of a morally grey character. But I feel like I needed to tell the story of how she got to that point in her life. And it's a very wholesome story, which will be coming out towards the end of next year. And I'm working on the sequel to Madame Voodoo at the moment, and many more stories and spin-offs, all within the same world, because I love stories that exist within the same universe. Like, for example, like Marvel or DC, anything like that, I'm obsessed with. I love little Easter eggs and characters crossing over. So that would be my dream to have something like that one day, but with
Wow.
witches.
I'm sure Disney will be keeping a very close eye. So, in terms of how your creativity process, how do you go about putting this together, coming up with the ideas, and even just setting apart the time so that you can focus on what you need to do?
Yeah, so it can be hard because obviously I still have a day job, a full-time job. Um, and I will set time apart to try and do writing, but at the same time, you shouldn't really force yourself because when I have forced myself, like, right, I've got this amount of time, I need to get something done, it's not the greatest writing that comes out, and I'll end up having to rewrite it or change things anyway. So if I'm not in the mood, I won't do it because I don't want to produce something that's rubbish. So a lot of the time it is mood writing that I do. Um, and in terms of how I get the story and the plot, I could sit here and say, oh, it comes to me in a dream, but it really doesn't. It I sit there and especially for like the lore of my books and stuff like that and creating the magical systems, it is sitting there and thinking hard about how I want everything to work and how I want it to be different from other people's ideas of it or what's similar to different books and stuff like that. But for the story itself, there's these terms called plotter and pantser. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but a plotter is someone that sits there and plots out every single chapter of the book and knows everything that's going to happen. I'm not that person. I'm a pantser. I know how it's going to start, I know how it's going to end, and I have a few key points in the middle. But everything in between is just I let the story take me for the ride, and if it feels like it's going a particular way, then I'll follow it in that direction rather than being like, oh no, I need to be here, you know? Sometimes it just flows. And when you're in a streak, you're in a streak. And when you're having a writer's block, unfortunately, you're having a writer's block.
Yeah, I like that. I really do. It's again entering into that state of flow and just allowing for it
Yeah.
to take over. That's incredible. Wow, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. So the book is available now in all good bookshops and Amazon, of course, as well.
Yeah, totally. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's really exciting to see my book in these places now. It still feels surreal, but I'm sure one day I'll get used to it.
And we look forward to the sequel as well. Before we let you go, could you just let the audience know how to connect with you and your X now we call it rather than Twitter if you're on that and social media handles.
Yeah, so on Instagram and TikTok, it's just AW Jackson author. And then I have a website as well where I'll post updates on whether I'm going to a Comic Con or competitions on Instagram and stuff like that. And oh, don't quote me on this, it's either awjackson.co.uk or awjackson.com. I've completely blanked on which one it
Don't
is.
worry, we'll put the links below.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be sure to put the links. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. It's just fantastic when you get to speak to an author and you see the creativity behind an incredible book. Madame Voodoo, what a story, what a book, and we cannot wait for the sequel. A.W. Jackson, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you want some amazing inspiration, check out the videos next to me, and I'll see you right there.